WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. I know it's been a busy time around here, and if you've been listening in, we've moved from baseball to football to obviously tons of hockey going on, as well as one of my favorite things. Every 4 years, they get together and play a World Cup. This guy and I got together and threw a little party about 8 years ago on behalf of the United States of America, who will not be playing in this year's World Cup. But we learned early in the morning on Wednesday, and it was certainly no surprise that the United States, along with Mexico and Canada, will be hosting World Cup games beginning in 2026. It sounds like 8 years from now, but then I realized it's been 8 years since I talked to this guy. He's the executive director of Maryland Sports, and they're trying to bring these World Cup games, or at least a portion of them, to Baltimore and play here at M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore. Terry Hasseltine, I'll make sure I'm pronouncing that pronunciation right, because I always seem to mess it up. He's been here forever as the executive director of Maryland Sports and trying to bring big events here. And you and I have gotten together on a number of occasions when Ronaldinho's come to town, and we brought Man United in and other teams into the area to play. But this is probably the big banana, right? The United States getting a World Cup. And I guess it salves a little bit of our sting for not being involved in this World Cup, right?
Well, it definitely is a great time to be in the city of Baltimore and the state of Maryland with the announcements Wednesday morning of the North America bid being successful. It puts Baltimore and the state of Maryland in the driver's seat to determine our destination for 2026. So I'm excited. I think the soccer community across the state should be excited, and I look forward to as you mentioned, 8 years. But the amount of work we have to do between now and 2020 to ensure that Baltimore and the state of Maryland remain on that short list of cities that get matches come 2026, we still got a lot of shovels to put in the ground, a lot of steps to march, and a lot of people to convince that we are the right place and we deserve to be a significant part of this process. Come 2026.
Well, give me the whole background on this. I mean, you and I got together 8 years ago. We were trying to get the bid for this World Cup in 18, which Russia did with mafia money. Then in 22, what Qatar did with mafia money and oil money. I'm really fed up with this. I mean, it's been a long time since you and I have talked. I mean, obviously, I have my differences with the baseball owner. I'm going to be writing a Dear Orioles series the next few weeks. And you see civic responsibility. You see what Ted Leonsis has done down there in Washington, D.C. and throwing that kind of a celebration to bring people together. I know it's your charge to try to get as many people in the downtown, into these stadiums, into sports in this state as we can. But who was the committee that put this together? Obviously, we have a president that's trying to alienate Mexico and Canada, and lo and behold, in the middle of all this political nonsense, we're now partners in throwing the biggest sporting event in the world. Who is behind all of this, and how did this happen? And obviously, a lot's happened, including a lot of arrests in Geneva, Switzerland in the middle of the night a couple of years ago in regard to FIFA and who does all of this. But now that it's here, who are the players involved in this? Because I'm sure they're different than they were a decade ago.
Oh, there's a total new leadership in FIFA. The process this go around was fully transparent, from the evaluation process and the like to how they scored out. I mean, they made that document public before the bid went. The fact that the entire FIFA delegation was the voting entity on the World Cup for 2026, which is a significant change because it used to be a small little core group of people who made a recommendation, and then that recommendation was accepted. This time, all, out of the eligible, votes within the delegation, 203 nations got to vote on who got the 2026 World Cup, which is totally different than the last time we went around. But to go back to your question, the committee, so the United Bid Committee was formed by the United States Soccer Federation, the Mexican Soccer Federation, and the Canadian Soccer Federation to put together a unified bid for North America and CONCACAF to pursue the 2026 World Cup, led by a gentleman who was a part of our team when we went after it for 18 and 22 by the name of John Christick, who has been the mastermind behind the scenes, pulling all the appropriate soccer aficionados like Jim Brown and Emily Duh and others together so that we could target the right message points, ensure that we're covering all the topics that FIFA is looking into now, everything from human rights to sustainability to venue capacity to transportation to accommodations, and all those things being a part of the entire evaluation process. And our job, as the lead of the bid for Baltimore, Maryland, was to ensure that we checked all the boxes and put all the information needed in each one of those buckets to make sure that we made it into that document that was presented to FIFA. And today was, Wednesday was an affirmation that we have done our due diligence and we helped the United Bid Committee tell the story they needed to tell for the North America bid to be successful.
All right, so what does this mean in the big picture for all of the United States cities and Mexico? And I saw the big list. People were sharing that out on Facebook as well. And I see that Edmonton's involved in this, and Montreal's involved, Toronto and Monterrey and Mexico City. Where does Baltimore land in all of this, and when will we know? And what's going to be the determining factor when Baltimore gets pitted against Kansas City or Chicago or Foxborough in regard? And I did notice that a lot of the Northeast cities, whether it's Washington, Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, up and down the East Coast, that's where the concentration of all of the bids are, quite frankly. And I don't think all of these East Coast cities are going to get games, right?
No. So what you have, so there's 80 total matches because the first World Cup, they'll have 48 teams. 60 matches played in the United States, 10 played in Canada, and 10 played in Mexico. So what's going to happen between now and late 2020, early 2021 is the United Bid Committee working in concert with FIFA and the other two federations. So we're still up in a bid process to some degree as a Baltimore, Maryland stand to identify and to work our tail off to position ourselves to be a match host. But as well as I do, this is bigger than just matches. There are so many activities that a nation has to put on in conjunction with the World Cup that we could be a city that ends up being a base camp for a team or two that would call Baltimore home during the entire 30-plus days of the World Cup. That is economic activity at its highest level. I mean, those teams always got to come back and base themselves back in Baltimore. They'll train here. Their fan base will be based out of here. We'll have a fan festival. We'll have matches on every day, showing on some big screen down in the Inner Harbor. We have visions of what that would look like, come 2026. But the other thing we're also involved in is possibly hosting a lot of the meetings that lead into the World Cup in 2026. We were identified as the host of the FIFA workshops in 2025, which is all 48 countries would have to come to Baltimore for a week to go through all the exercises of what transportation would look like in the United States, what the venues look like, what the media expectations are, kind of that coaching and training, and that's a week long. That's like having a major convention in town, but it has all the flair of the World Cup because all the branding and all the excitement that will happen in the streets because they're in town. So there are a lot of other things that this will open up doors, that we couldn't even imagine. There'll be more soccer friendlies happening here or being requested to happen here. We'll be involved, obviously, hopefully down the road in the CONCACAF Gold Cup again. We just got to get beyond our little construction that's going on at M&T Bank Stadium right now. And once that's done, our doors will be open for business again. And those things like the Chelsea AC Milan game and the CONCACAF Gold Cup where we sold out the venue, those things can get back on the radar again because our venue will be that much better and, we'll have the capability of, turning those things around on a dime. So there's a lot of work still to be done, but Baltimore is in a really great position. I feel very confident that we're going to have a lot of opportunity, for various activities in and around the World Cup in the years to come. So this is a great day when it comes to, the soccer community in the state of Maryland.
Terry Hasseltine is joining us here. He is from the Maryland Sports, the executive director. Has been doing this how many years now? Been a decade for you, right? Like that?
It'll be 10 years in August.
Yeah, and, I feel like these World Cups come and go, and, my wife was very, very ill 4 years ago, and the kid that saved her life was from Germany, so we're obviously rooting for Germany here to win the World Cup again as the second choice at 5-1 out in Vegas. But, and watching all this happen and knowing where we were a decade ago and trying to get the bidding, we've always been the ideal host, right? Because we have the venues. In most of the other places in the world, they don't have this many venues. In South Africa, they had to build venues. Throughout Europe, they have venues, but in the past had to build those. I know in 1994, it's amazing, man. I look back at the 94, I wikied it, Terry, and I looked at the venues they were using. Not that there's anything wrong with the Rose Bowl, right? Not that there's anything wrong with some of the stadiums that they used 25 years ago, but most of those stadia are retired now or so tired that, you know, the MetLife stadiums and those kinds of giant the new stadium that's coming online out in L.A. and Inglewood that Stan Kroenke stole the football team from St. Louis to build, that's going to be online. So it's a whole different level of facility we've had here. The one thing we don't have is a quality soccer program, and that's pretty obvious, but because we didn't qualify this year. So does this mean we automatically qualify? I know that there was some conjecture about that because Mexico and Canada would also have to qualify. Did they give 3 automatic bids on this thing in 26?
In all fairness, not to my understanding. There is, you know, based on the way traditionally some things have happened, there are slotted spots. But this does not guarantee that the three nations, you know, get an automatic in. But once again, mentioning that we're going to a 48-team tournament, thus that gives more opportunity for federations to send more clubs, you know, to the World Cup. Some people say that's, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. The fact of the matter is that if you're playing in the World Cup, you're playing soccer at the highest level, and people really take to watching, you know, the World Cup. As you mentioned, every 4 years it comes on. It's tradition. You spend a month, you know, flipping channels trying to get to the right match that you want to see. There's the camaraderie. You see how nations like the Netherlands in their orange, you know, all dressed out and decked out. You see all this pageantry.
By the way, they're not in this year either, by the way, Netherlands.
No, I know.
Italy's not in. It's crazy when these countries get left out, man. We're all sitting with our nose pressed up to the glass like a puppy dog. It's terrible.
Yeah, but you know, when it's all said and done, you know, I think, you know, there's a new tide in, you know, U.S. soccer. You know, new president, new leadership. You know, looking at, you know, the national team, looking at our grassroots programs that feed our national team. I think there's there was a gut check. You know, at the U.S. level, you know, after this year's not qualifying, that, you know, we had to go back and we have to reinvent ourselves. And I think it will be really challenging. It'll be really tough if we host the World Cup in 2026 and one of the host nations not in it.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about that, and I guess the door is open at this point. You know, around the world, historically, when they did this, if you go back and Google when Russia Mafia, they bought the bid for this year, the whole country goes crazy and they run into the square. Boy, we're not that country, are we? I mean, we got the biggest bid in the world on Wednesday morning, and I don't know, it caused a little ripple at 7 or 8 in the morning, and soccer people like me know about it, and people that are gearing up for the World Cup to begin, this weekend, and you're going to set their clocks all day long to watch 3, sometimes 4 games a day over the next 2 weeks. We all know about it, but boy, there was no running in the streets here, was there?
No, as a matter of fact, one of the unique challenges was because the FIFA Congress was in Moscow time, it started at 2 a.m. So, you know, guys like me were in my office at about 3:15, 3:30, because we were expecting the announcement to come down at like 4 a.m., but, you know, timing and the way the agenda worked on the Congress, it actually pushed a little bit, you know, towards the 5:30, you know, marker. But when it's all said and done, no, we're not the type of nation when we announced that, you know, the largest, you know, single sporting event in the world is coming to our nation. Do we flock the streets in celebration? However, we will have that day and we'll have that time during this World Cup, and hopefully in 2022 will really be the big time to celebrate because we're next on the clock.
Well, poor Morocco finished second in this one. We were kind of bidding against ourselves, right? Like it was a little bit of an unopposed bid, although 65 people in the committee did vote for Morocco. But then again, Qatar won the last time they got together and put these straws together where they didn't even have a stadium built. I I'm grossed out by the corruption, Terry. I mean, and anyone who's been paying attention, and I got the guy on who wrote the book on the fat guy up in New York with the parrots up in his penthouse, and all the nonsense that was going on with the kind of corruption. I think people are a little fed up with the corruption part of this. I would hope that 8 years later, when it gets here, that it really is this big, wonderful thing that I know it can be, that I know it was in 1994. My feeling about this and running around Germany and seeing it, but I'm itchy with it happening over in Russia right now. I'll be itchy 4 years from now when it's over in Qatar, and I know that this country and this, North America is going to do a great job, better job than anybody of hosting this because we have the capacity to do that. I think it's sort of long overdue. It'll be 32 years, right, from the last World Cup, and but I think it's going to be right on time, and I really do hope we get a part of this. Give me a little peel back the onion as to what happens here over the next 12, 24, 36 months, when you expect to get the, hey, Baltimore's going to be participating or going to be participating in a small way. Look, I know the World Cup final's not coming here, but what would be pie in the sky for the Baltimore committee? And obviously getting locked out would suck, but what would be a nice consolation prize? Because we're not getting the World Cup final here. We don't have the 1,000-seat stadium, but there's no reason we can't get a game or two or three, right? What would be a big win?
So basically, from now until the mid part of 2020, we're going to be working with the United Bid Committee and identifying and closing up some of the information that they probably still need from us, that's beyond what we had to provide in the bid, just to, cross T's and dot I's. We're going to put our best foot forward and explain to them why we want to be in, match contention and make sure we can get at minimum a match. And ideally, we're going to probably be somewhere in that pool play to, quarterfinal realm of, hosting matches if we're so fortunate to do that. But for us, that the ultimate is hosting matches, and then the, good consolation prize if we are year in and year out starting to host significant international soccer friendlies. The CONCACAF Gold Cup is coming back, year in and year out. And during the World Cup process, we're getting the high-level profile meetings and some of the base camp stuff. That stuff is significant to the Baltimore's, economic and media value as well, because it's exposure for our city that's positive, and it's things that can help us, bring forward initiatives to help grow the game in the region, maybe help us develop some new facilities that our city desperately needs when it comes to green space opportunities. So for us, the legacy of being a part of this could be the victory, because it could leave behind things that we currently don't have in our landscape, which is green space so kids can play and learn the game and really be, coached to the highest level to be a contributor to maybe a national team down the road. Those type of things are the legacy that a World Cup can bring to a community that might not transact into a match being played in our stadium. Now, that would be, I'd be really saddened if we don't get a match, but I realize there's bigger opportunities and bigger growth opportunities for the game and for the youth of the greater Baltimore area, because of our involvement in the World Cup process.
So the word is there will be 16 cities involved in this, and there are 23 doing bidding, right? I mean, and that's down significantly too. Some of the New Orleans and the Birminghams and the Vancouvers and the Salt Lake cities have kind of dropped by the wayside, but north of the border there's Montreal, Toronto, and Edmonton. South of the border there's Monterrey, Guadalajara, and Mexico City. They will obviously have some impact on this, right? Both of those places will get games, right?
Yep. Yeah, like I said, there's 80 total matches in the 2026 World Cup. 60 will be played in the United States, 10 in Canada, and 10 in Mexico.
So 60 in the States.
What the scope of that looks like, no one knows yet.
No one knows anything about that. So in the States, let's go down the border here. Boston, New Jersey, which is MetLife Stadium, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, Cincinnati, Nashville, Atlanta, Orlando, Miami, through the Midwest, Houston, Dallas, Kansas City, Denver, and out west, Seattle, San Francisco, and L.A. We're talking soccer stadia in all these places. And, obviously to me, MetLife Stadium, Dallas and Jerry's World, the LA thing, I mean, they're almost locks, right? I mean, like literally because of the size of their stadium and the size of the market, I would think that Toronto and Mexico City are almost locks to be the places in their country because they have the better facilities. But I think all the rest of this, when you're comparing Baltimore against Kansas City or against Denver or against even Houston or Atlanta, a very comparable stadium situation here, I think, right? And it's not like the Super Bowl where you have to have a roof on the stadium and it has to be a golf course nearby. None of that plays into it. It really does play into airports and other stadia and facilities and the type of things that we may have an upper hand on places like Cincinnati and Nashville, because I've been to those places. There's nothing they have we don't have.
No, I think you're spot on. It's a matter now of making sure that our dialogue with the big committee is sincere. It's about big picture thinking. It's our stadium is going through a $124 million renovation, putting in vertical infrastructure for transportation, i.e. escalators. We're putting in new kitchen system. We got new video boards, new suite content going in. So we're addressing a lot of the things that other people would have to probably start new build on, and we got a great reputation. Look at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. It's one of the most iconic ballparks in all of baseball, who has a legacy of enduring year in, year out without a rebuild because we've maintained and have kept it at the highest level. And we're doing the same thing with M&T Bank Stadium, one of the few stadiums that doesn't have to change the dimension of our bowl in order to fit a soccer pitch, because we have the dimension there that meets the standards for FIFA requirements. So, and the fact that we went back to natural grass is a huge benefit. And the fact that we have a very can-do, can-get-it-done attitude when it comes to these type of activities, and we have a proven track record of when we've done various soccer friendlies and other major events, we do them well and we do them successfully, and we have a reputation of getting it done well.
Unlike Pittsburgh, where they won't be hosting any World Cup games. I just want to point that out. Terry Hasseltine joining us here. He is the Executive Director of Maryland Sports. Tell everybody what you do in your office. You've been there for 10 years doing it this way, and this is a real feather in the cap for everyone. And this was something you were brought in to do really 10 years ago, is run this sort of a bid in this sort of a way. And finally on Wednesday, it happened. We're going to have World Cup games in this country in 8 years.
Yep. So my job is, basically, sport tourism and economic development through sports. My job is to help, people across the state identify opportunities that can bring people here to participate, play, spectate, or watch, you name it. And if it's around sports, we're probably involved with it. But we do a lot of our work and a lot of our effort, in all fairness, on the amateur sports level, where we're helping large youth soccer tournaments, large lacrosse tournaments, and those type of things come to fruition. Yes, on Wednesday morning we announced the World Cup, which is it's one of the biggest events out there in the market. But we're also very instrumental in bringing the NCAA women's lacrosse, national championships back to Baltimore for 4 consecutive years, starting in 19, 3 years at Johns Hopkins, 1 year at Towson. We're also charged we're bringing the International Federation of Lacrosse Women's World Cup, to Baltimore in 2021, and that will be hosted at Towson. We're helping U.S. Lacrosse bring their women's national tournament, to the Baltimore area, 19 through 22, working with our partners down at Elite Tournaments to help grow and expand their tournament, over Memorial Day weekend from a several hundred team tournament to almost 1,000 team tournament. So our job is to identify, cultivate, and grow and foster relationships so that, Maryland and Baltimore and the like can be successful in generating revenue through sports.
All right, well, it's happened. It took a long, long time. I'm awaiting the Baltimore 26 U.S. team jersey for you. I would wear that the next couple of days, but there's nowhere to wear it. So if you can get me a Germany jersey, I'll accept that at this point, maybe a little Argentina or whatever. But it does suck sitting this one out and watching in the mornings and watching everyone else play. But knowing that in 2026 there might be games right around the corner, that turns me on. You know what a fan I am of the world's game and the beautiful game. And all I can say is let's put our ducks in a row and put our best foot forward and try to get some World Cup games here in Baltimore, Chair.
That's what we're going to do. That's what it's going to take the entire village to make it happen. And we look forward to creating those partnerships, that will allow us to get over the finish line. So you can, step in the stadium and watch some some matches right here in M&T Bank Stadium here in Baltimore.
Well, I hope
my goal is to keep you home, Nestor.
I hope that's the case. Well, the Caps took me out to Vegas. If you got to take me anywhere, take me to Vegas. But meanwhile, we'll await the real World Cup coming here in 8 years and watch this other thing that we're not involved in for the next month or so. Terry, always a pleasure, man. Take care of yourself. Don't be a stranger. Holler out if you need something around here.
Will do. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
Terry Hasseltine joining us here from Maryland Sports and the commission there. He's the executive director. And we got a chance of having real World Cup games here in Baltimore. You'll definitely want to take a look out on our website. We threw a little note up about that. You can find these other cities that are now involved in the bidding in America. So 60 of the games are going to be played in the United States of America. We just need to be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of those games. That's all. And certainly the bidding's good, but it's one of the reasons we built the stadium here 20 years ago and put all that money into it is to have these kinds of events. And hopefully you two will come back at some point too. Maybe even Bruce. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. Watching the World Cup, we are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.